War Machine is one of Netflix's latest movies to be released on the platform, and following the death of 81's brother, the dream that he always had for both himself and 81 was to become a part of the Rangers and walk over the finish line together, proving that they could be the most elite soldiers that they could possibly be. However, with him being killed in Afghanistan, his dying wish was something that never came true. This is a sci-fi war movie like no other, and the ending of it showed that the end of the world could be in sight, with deeper themes focused around never giving up and how different experiences and traumas in life can provide lessons to help others. Let's dive into the movie, answer what this machine truly was, discuss the deeper meaning, and I'll share if the movie's worth watching. Here is a review of War Machine and the ending explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The ending explained. When it came to the ending of this movie, we saw that 81 had essentially gone full circle, and the trauma that he was suffering with when he tried to save his brother by walking him back to base on his shoulders but collapsing 100 yards from it, he was essentially now doing it again, but with number 7. After managing to evade the War Machine for the entirety of the movie, he realized that the weapons that they had weren't going to be a match for it. Something that was established in the early part of the movie when they tried to damage it with the explosive devices when they first encountered it. As they said, it didn't even leave a dent. The choking of the vents with the rocks showed that modern weapons weren't needed, but the raw materials that were on the planet that was alien to the War Machine, could ultimately provide its biggest downfall. 81 was a character who kept himself to himself and was seen as a war machine himself, as the sergeant said that they'd never seen anything like him before. But the isolated state that he kept himself in was the very thing that was his downfall. It was only as the movie went on and we saw that he was gaining the trust of the others and became the leader that he truly was inside, where he gained the respect of those around him. When asked if he wanted to be a team leader during the beginning, he declined, and that was because he didn't want to be responsible for the downfall of anybody else, because he couldn't get over the fact that he felt as though he let his brother down by not managing to get him back to base, and he didn't want to be responsible for anybody else. Throughout the early parts of the movie, the news broadcast that it would cut to, where we saw glimpses of the asteroid that was floating around the planet, was a subtle way of showing us that something damaging was on the horizon, and I thought that was a nice touch. During the ending, after 81 single-handedly defeated the War Machine, following 7 revealing to him that he knew his brother because they were in training together and he recognized the DFQ tattoo that he had on his arm, 81 being the very person that managed to carry him over the finish line felt even more symbolic because of that. He was able to save somebody that his brother was connected to, and in the eyes of 81, he managed to pull through this time. "Don't effing quit" in the voice of his brother was the very thing that was carrying him through the entirety of the mission that he never thought he'd find himself in. And with him going through the death march, he felt as though he finally made his brother proud. 81 felt responsible for his brother's death because he never made it back to base. He couldn't sleep, and it was almost like it was a nightmare that replayed in his mind over and over again. But 7 told him and showed him that he didn't fail like he thought he did. He never gave up and pushed himself to the furthest limit that he possibly could, and that was what made a true Ranger. So he was a Ranger long before he even applied for it. I also felt like when we saw him absolutely owning the training that they were going through and pushing himself to the limit in ways like nobody else had seen before, that was because even though they were tough challenges, to him it wasn't. The toughest thing that he ever went through, or was ever going to need to go through, was when he watched his brother die in front of him and he had to try and get him back to base before he died. 81 was made a team leader on the final challenge that they had, and as we saw, when asked to give a speech to the rest of the group, he wasn't able to give one that was inspiring to the others. However, with him making it back right at the end, and after learning a lot about himself along the way, especially the value in being in a team, rather than just working on his own, before the other Rangers embarked on the mission of looking to take out all of the other war machines that had invaded the other parts of the planet, he gave one that managed to inspire the rest of the group, showing that he'd gone on a full journey himself and that the issue that the sergeant noticed in the past, which was the lack of mental strength, not the physical strength, he'd now gained it and was ready to be a true Ranger. He was doing it for his brother, but as well, now he was doing it for himself. Like the sergeant said himself, the finish line is actually the starting point, and with him going off after the machines right after he walked through it, it was proved right. With it being said that many of the machines split off around the globe, I could definitely see a sequel for this movie being made. One which would be set in a different country, or one that's actually set all around the globe. So I imagine if this film does well on Netflix, we might get that on our screens in the near future. What was the War Machine? Well, we never properly found out what the machine was, but what we know was that it was presumed to be an asteroid that was orbiting around planet Earth. However, once it broke off, it split into many different versions of these machines that landed all around the planet. They wanted to carry out a global invasion and wipe out the entirety of the human race. These machines were able to communicate to their home planet in outer space, and we saw that modern weapons of our world weren't able to do any real damage to it whatsoever. Only raw materials from the planet could. The main way that we saw it being defeated came from the fact that 81 used to work as a mechanic. He realized that the ventilator that the machine had could be choked if it was overwhelmed and smothered. This is why all of the stones and rocks that flooded into the ventilator caused it to overheat and for it to explode, because it basically couldn't breathe. As 81 said himself, if the radiator got jammed, then it would end up choking. We don't yet know if these machines can communicate with each other on the planet, but I would presume that they could. So if there is a sequel, I imagine we'll see that happening. My review of the movie. Now, I thought this was an okay film. I don't think it was incredible, but from a visual perspective, it was entertaining. From a character perspective, I thought there was depth to 81, and in terms of an excitement point of view, I thought it was enjoyable to watch. I thought the first part of the movie, where we learned about 81's brother and then saw how it impacted him in the present day throughout training, was actually really interesting. I thought they did a good job at really showing us just how impacted by his brother's death 81 was, and by putting him in this emotionally stunted corner, it allowed a lot of room for the character to grow throughout the runtime, so I liked that. One thing that I will say though is that Alan Ritchson did basically just play Reacher in this movie. That's not a negative because I think he's great at being Reacher, but it was very, very similar to that character. It's Reacher versus a space robot. I thought some of the deaths and injuries that we saw in this movie were really graphic. The guy that was pierced with the branch, that one looked absolutely brutal. Also, when one was just rolling down the hill and they hit their head on the boulder, that was something that was also just out of the blue and surprising. The movie didn't hold back with the gore, and I thought it actually worked quite well. It added an extra level of immersion to it. Even some of the corpses were just so haunting to look at, especially the ones that were just burnt to a crisp. Don't get me wrong, the movie was very predictable, and I thought some of the plot armor that 81 had was incredibly ridiculous. For example, when everybody in the vehicle ended up being killed and he barely had a scratch. And also the fact that 7 was just laying there without any other injuries. I did roll my eyes a bit, but I do understand it's a bit of a ridiculous and out there movie, so in my mind I just let that slide. Another moment where I also thought that was when everyone was going through the rapids unharmed and then they just emerged at the bottom of a waterfall without any injuries whatsoever. It's ridiculous, but I suppose it is an action film. I also thought some of the CGI was a bit questionable. The bit that I thought was the worst was when they were trying to get over the rapids. It looked so fake and it did take me out of it for a brief moment, so I was a bit disappointed with that. Other than that though, for the most part, the visuals were okay. When it came to the actual war machine itself, I thought it was quite haunting. Even though it didn't speak, the music that would accompany it when it would appear, the way the ground would shake, and also the way it would just fall silent, and then the blue scan would scan the perimeter and essentially hunt. There was a slightly frightening element to it. It was creative and I quite liked it. Overall, I'd say that this movie is worth a watch. It's not amazing, but it's not terrible. For the most part, I was hooked to the screen because of the visuals, the action, or the emotional weight that it felt like I was carrying due to 81 mourning his brother. It's a great movie to throw on over the course of the weekend, and with it being under 2 hours, it's not that large of a commitment if you don't enjoy it either. If you're a fan of Reacher, then I think you'll definitely like this. So, there you have it, a review of War Machine and the ending explained. If you want to see more of your favourite TV series and movies being broken down, then check the playlist below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of War Machine? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.